So who needs this? Why would you ever even want to purchase this and look at it? If your child has a processing problem, if they have a blocked learning gate, if they're a struggling reader, or dyslexia, or struggling writer. So we see, when we do this therapy, we see dramatic changes. So if they're struggling with, and this is going to be on your slide, but I like the way the bubbles are here. If you have a child struggling with hearing and understanding, or slow labored reading, or dyslexia, or eye tracking problems, or poor memory, labored writing, I have found that the therapy is what will get these kids past the disability. And so 80% reduction in the disability is what we're looking for. The reason I love this, when we think about the 4 learning gates, we know that the visual gate, and we've talked about this a lot, is where the automaticity hasn't occurred. And this is what the doctors had discovered. They found the left brain is a concentrating brain. When we first learn something new, like eye tracking, we have to concentrate on it. Then it's supposed to transfer over this all-important midline, the corpus callosum, lodge in the automatic hemisphere. For many of my students, that hadn't lodged over there. Probably for your child either. How do you know if that hasn't transferred to the automatic hemisphere? Is if they read words backwards, on and no, was is saw, big is dig, or if they do slow, halting reading, or want to take a letter out of the middle and put it in the front. We have in this Brain Integration Therapy Manual diagnostic tools for you. It'll have the visual processing gate. What are the symptoms that the child's going to show you that the visual processing has not transferred to the automatic hemisphere? And I just love being able to make a difference in a child and get that transferred over. In fact, just before we made this video, I was checking my BlackBerry, and I was just checking my emails. And I'm just going to read to you here one that just came in from a parent who has been using the Brain Integration Therapy Manual. And this is what she said. She said their son is 8 years old, and they've been doing the brain training sessions. They're ready to go on to the writing one. And she said, I want to give you an update of my 8-year-old son. She said, we just finished the 10 weeks of visual training from the Brain Integration Therapy Manual. And now my son says that the words are staying on the page now. Many times these words jump and they move, and their eyes aren't working together as a team, binocularity, eye teaming, while crossing from left to right. We can do these exercises to train the brain to make those work together. She said, he said the words are staying on the page now. They're not jumping around anymore. He's beginning to learn how to read now. Praise God. It is still a long road, and I'm very thankful that he is having this breakthrough. Hundreds of emails I get like this, and I have seen it myself. So if we're going to look at who needs this, a child who has a processing problem where their eyes aren't working together as a team. Are they told your child that your child needs vision therapy? Vision therapy is a very good thing, but we also know it's a very expensive thing. With my students in school, they would all have qualified for needing vision therapy, but there was no money for that. I didn't have that choice. So what I had, though, was this brain integration therapy where I could tell those eyes, the eye tracking from left to right, to transfer to the automatic hemisphere. And that's what I did. What I really love the brain integration therapy for, and the very best thing I have seen it work for, is auditory processing. Auditory processing problems can create a real havoc for a child because it doesn't just affect eye tracking. It doesn't just affect writing. It affects their whole life. These are the kids who often have that deer in the headlights look. Well, I had a young man named Casey who was a 6th grader, and he was a big guy. And I remember he told me, I was asking him who his teachers were that year. And he would give me like charades. Remember, the right brain has a picture, the left brain has the names of people, of words, of sounds, of phonics. He couldn't bring the name over to match. So he said, okay, for language arts I have, do you know the gal who always wears her glasses, around her neck, and she's gray haired? And for woodworking, remember, I have that guy. So he was just describing because he couldn't pull the name over. And I said, I bet, Casey, when your cousins and friends come over that you haven't seen for a little while, you don't remember their names either. He said, oh no, I just call them, you know who. He said, because I can never remember the names. By the end of the year, when I had very faithfully done this brain training with him and my whole class, exercises 4 days a week, 1 day a week, one-on-one, brain training, a repatterning. By the end of the year, he said, Mrs. Kraft, we have all new teachers now. Ask me any of them. I know them all. Oh, we have kids who can't hear their silent voice. They are saying the alphabet over and over and over while they're writing it because they don't hear their silent voice in their head. I learned this from my middle schoolers as I would do this brain training with them, telling their brain, make connections, reconnect whatever got disconnected to hear that silent internal voice. And they would tell me, Mrs. Kraft, it's working. I can hear my silent voice now, but it's like it's down the hall. So I said, okay, all I knew to do was more brain training, more exercises, and I did. And probably was 2 months later to say, okay, now when I read silently, I hear my voice in my head. I don't have to always speak it out loud. Now when I want to do mental math, I don't lose my voice in my head. So I love brain training because I can heal an auditory processing using this brain training, oils, and lecithin, which is from the Biology Behavior CD set. Sometimes I would have, for example, if I would have a child who was doing like Pam's daughter Dianne, she would say, t. Remember, left brain has pieces, right brain has the whole. She couldn't go from the piece to the whole. She could never just look at it and get the whole fat. Or when I have kids who are more advanced in reading and they can sound out 2 syllables, nap, kin, nap. And they're getting kin. And you say, okay, honey, now whisper it a little bit, because if you whisper it, usually napkin, the piece goes into napkin, the whole. And they say, napkin. Okay, is that a word you know? No. Or tab, and they'll get the tab, and then they'll get the let. But once they got the let, the tab isn't there. What happens? Before I knew about brain integration therapy as a teacher, I just have them practice it a lot. We'd practice and practice and practice, slower, louder, multiple repetitions, and by the end of the year we would have made some progress for sure. But I would not have taken care of the disability, and it would not have been a 2-year progress, a 2-year growth. Now when I hear those puzzling auditory processing glitches because some things have become unplugged between the left and right hemisphere, I get excited. I said, I know how to help that child. By the end of the year, that's not going to be a problem. I had an 8th grader named Dolores, and she was saying what all the time. And I said, Dolores, you keep saying what because we need to clarify it. But my goal is that I'm going to train your brain to make so many connections that what you hear is going to glue on, so that you won't have to say what all the time. We got to the end of the year, and I forgot to ask her, and she came up and said, Mrs. Kraft, have you noticed that I don't say what anymore? I said, that's right. She said, now when I hear something, I can hold on to it. So my greatest pleasure is to get rid of an auditory processing problem, and I can do it with this to 80%, which means when they're coming down with the flu or they're tired, these symptoms are going to come back, but not in any way that we see that hangs around. My word guessers, the guys who've had the best phonics program in the world. I love my right brain phonics program because it puts glue on it, but I don't want to have to use that program forever. I want the brain to have the glue there. So when I glue in the sounds using brain integration therapy, then they can move on. I don't have to see them anymore. I love these kids, but I don't want them to be in my remedial programs because they're so bright and so hardworking. So we see dramatic results with kids who have auditory processing problems, kids who can't sound out words, kids who can't hear their silent voice. Oftentimes they can't sequence the months of the year. Like a young man I had just last week, a 13-year-old, so bright, asked him the months, and he was just panicked because he couldn't sequence. If you can't sequence, that's a whole different area. That means all sorts of other things are out. In the brain integration therapy, I'll show you how to be your child's own therapist at home. And in fact, you know what? I have over the years taught this. And there's several people around different states that will do this brain integration therapy for a child. And the parent brings their child there once a week. And they charge $95 a session. and they have a waiting list. Why? Because this brain integration therapy works. And they're not doing anything wrong by doing that. They're doing a good job. My job, however, is to train you at home so you can do the once-a-week brain training, the daily exercises. Nothing takes more than 20 minutes a day, so that you will not have to pay somebody else to be your own therapist. And by the end of the year, you will see the same changes. And when you use this, we are always available via email to help you think things through so you don't get stuck.